Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to bring you my thoughts and feelings on A Court of Rings and Ruin by Sarah J Maas. If you continue to watch this video, please know that you are spoiling yourself at your own risk. Okay, so where to begin? If you watched my weekly wrap up on Monday, you will have heard my initial thoughts on the book, but I did promise to do a spoiler-filled sort of thought video. Keep in mind that these are just some of my thoughts on the story, and they're pretty incoherent, so I'm going to apologise in advance for that. I'm going to talk about the things I liked and the things that I didn't like, because you're allowed to have both in a book that you love, possibly even more so in a book that you love. And I am going to base it purely off the characters, not on the storyline, because, well, the storyline happened and that's fine. But really it's the characters that drive A Court of Wings and Ruin, just like it was in A Court of Mist and Fury, and their relationships with one another. I'm going to kick it off with Tyra because she's the main character. Obviously the story is told from her perspective, and you know, it's important to start with those really important characters. The really nice thing about Tyra is that in The Court of Mist and Fury, we saw her deal with a lot of post-traumatic stress, and that didn't just stop in this book. She's dealing with a lot of stuff. She does a lot of really questionable things, both her and Rhysand do, and they acknowledge that they have to do really horrible things in order to, you know, fight and survive and keep Prithia safe from the king as he is set to invade. Most of that was okay for me. I actually found the first few chapters where Tyra is in the Spring Court almost to be, I don't want to say redundant, because she wasn't there for long enough, I felt, to have had the impact that she did. What she did to Tamlin was quite vindictive, actually, and I'm not excusing Tamlin's behaviour, because his behaviour in ACOWAR was appalling. I'm not excusing any of that, but man, she went to extremes, to the point where I almost felt sorry for him, and I don't know whether that was Sarah J Maas's intent, but you know, Tyra decimated his forces, which became a real problem later on because Sarah J Maas had him constantly siding with Tyra and the High Lords and supposedly playing the king. That part really struck me as strange. However, that said, you know, Tyra is this really awesome character who has been through a lot. She has fought for her family, she's fought for herself, she is now fighting for her people, which, you know, gives her even more of a sense of purpose, and she's fighting for her sisters who, you know, at this point in time aren't even sure that they like her anymore because they've gone through all of this crap because of her. As always, her relationship with Rhysand was really endearing. They're absolutely adorable together. They're a total match, made in, you know, bad decision but perfectness, really. It's almost a little bit disgusting how perfect they are for one another, but that's beside the point. I really liked how she kept trying. She kept trying. She let herself be trained. She let herself participate in something horrific like war, and she was strong enough to admit that she didn't like it, and she felt like she was a coward for not wanting to be down there in the nitty-grittiness of war. You know, this is where I'm going to sort of segue into Rhysand's character. He's a ridiculously perfect person, really. He's an ideal, and I don't know if you'd ever find someone like Rhysand in real life, because he embodies the ideal person. He's understanding, he's caring, he can be ruthless, but he can be ruthless for a purpose, and he loves Tyra with everything, and he's determined to keep her safe while still letting her make her own decisions, which is amazing. She fights with him and the inner circle when they go to the summer courts, but then he doesn't force her to participate in the frontline battles, but he doesn't make her feel bad for not participating in the frontline battles later on. You know, their conversations around the war were really telling, because they're both the leaders of their people now, and he has emphasized the whole way through that it is a equal partnership. You know, they're equals, and he demonstrates that time and time again. He does feel possessive and he does try and protect her, but he also understands that she's going to go off and do what she wants to do, like when she ran off to go and find the Azrael, and when she finds herself at the Weaver in the Woods cottage. He knows she's going to do stuff like that, and he turns around to her and he says, I know you're going to do it, but at least let us know that you're going to do it beforehand, or leave us a note, which is refreshing, let's be honest. And speaking of Rhysand, I love him, I really do, but he was not my favourite character in this book or in this series anymore, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. What I will say, thank you Sarah J Maas for slightly toning down all of the sex scenes in here, because while I think there were probably more of them, at least they didn't go on for pages and pages. And let's be honest, I skimmed through most of them because they weren't the most interesting part of the story. Clearly this series has fully tipped over into the new adult area, and it does even now contain the disclaimer of contains mature content. But yeah, for the most part, I skipped over those because they actually aren't the most interesting part of any story. I spoke a little bit about Tamlin before. Honestly, his character confuses me now. It really does. Like I said, I don't excuse any of his previous behaviour because I think that nothing can excuse that where Feyre is concerned. He is incredibly possessive and controlling. But this whole backwards and forwards of, is he on their side? Is he not on their side? Is he on their side? It was exhausting and it was hard to keep track of and make a decision, really. At the end of the book, when Feyre needs all of the High Lords to help her save Rhysand, you know, eventually he comes to the party and he steps up and he does it. And if that's not a tiny bit of character growth, I don't know what is. Do I forgive him? No. Do I hope that he eventually finds some measure of peace for himself? Yes, I do, because I think, as with all of the main characters, he has also been through the absolute ringer. Sarah J. Maas, if you didn't want me to feel sympathy for him, you shouldn't have written him the way that you did at the end of this, because I don't know how to describe it. You know when you just get to a point and you're like, I don't know how I feel about this character. I hate him and I feel sympathy for him and I don't know how I feel about any of that. So we'll move on. So I'm going to move on to Mor, who I absolutely adore. Oh, she's wonderful. And Sarah J. Maas gets a lot of flack for not including diversity in her books, and it's clear that she probably got told to include a bit more in here, because Mor's revelation that she prefers females to males, I don't know. I'm happy about it, I am, because I think it's well needed, and I thought her explanation and her backstory worked well, but I almost felt like it came too little too late. And what tipped me over the edge with it, and this is probably one of the things that frustrated me the most, was the way she treated Azrael. I get that she is scared and that it's not looked upon with kindness among her people, not her family, but among general Prithian society. But Azrael was one of her best friends and she basically led him on. And while she wasn't trying to lead him on, she was actively trying to discourage his interest in her. She never did anything to completely sever that connection. And I felt so bad for him. And I felt so bad for her because she can't be with who she wants to be. He can't be with who he wants to be because he doesn't know. And I don't know, did anyone else feel that way? I just feel so sorry and so sad for both of them. And I just want them both to find happiness because they're just precious and I love them. But all that aside, Mor kicked ass. It was so nice to see her getting involved in the fighting. I really loved her reaction when Feyre tricked her into going into battle so she could sneak off to go and see the Suriel, and Mor came back and she was just furious with Feyre and called her out on the fact that she didn't trust Mor enough to let her know that she was going. And yes, Feyre had her reasons for doing that, but Mor had every right to be so mad at her. That was nice to see, and it was nice also to see female characters being mad at each other for legitimate reasons rather than just because they could be. And they did they talked about it, or they thought about it, and then they talked about it, and then they found ways to move on, and that is the sign of friendship. You know, that was really fantastic to see. And then we come to my favorite character. And you'll see me perk up because Azrael is my favorite character now, and I can't even explain why. Not properly, I don't think, because I was caught by surprise because I love the entire inner circle. I think that they're all really amazing, really interesting characters with all different backgrounds, who've all found their way into the Night Court and to Rhysand, who is literally the linchpin of this group. I don't know what to say. It just sort of snuck up on me. I really liked him in A Court of Mist and Fury, but in A Court of Wings and Ruin, you really see that he is the character who keeps himself in the background, but he sees everything. He's the spy, so he sees everything, but it's not just outwardly. He sees everything that's going on inside their own little group, particularly where Feyre's sisters are concerned, and in particular with Elaine. He's the only character who doesn't actively pick fights with Feyre's sisters. And he looks after Elaine and he treats her with respect when everyone else thinks she's going crazy, because for whatever reason, however it is that he knew that wasn't the reason. He knew that she just needed support, and he gave that to her in his own way. And then when Feyre decided that she wanted to learn how to fly, and he offered, because he was the only one of them who had to learn to fly as a child, but not from birth. So he remembers the fear of having to learn how to fly, which Feyre suffers from. She, she's an adult. You have adult fears about falling and about crashing into things and about failing. You know, you have to overcome all of those things to be able to do something like flying. And he's the only one who remembers that he had to overcome those fears, because children don't fear anything. They only fear things when people tell them to fear them. And Rhysand and Cassian both learned to fly as children, so they don't have that same issue. And they would have been less suitable to help her learn, basically. And then I feel for Azrael, because he loves more. I don't know, if I could bundle up Azrael and give him a hug, I would, because he is awesome. He needs a book of his own. Let's have a book of Azrael, please. Speaking of Elaine, she was probably, I didn't find her story as engaging as some of the others. It was interesting that she essentially became a seer. Aside from that plotline, I don't feel that Sarah did anything with her character. She certainly didn't do much to address the mating bond between her and Lucien. There are aspects of it, but I don't feel that it was dealt with. And it certainly wasn't something that was wrapped up neatly in a bow, which is not a bad thing, because Sarah J Maas has a habit of ensuring that everyone is paired up by the end of a book, and thankfully not everyone was paired up by the end of the book, because that's not reality. But yeah, I wasn't as invested in Elaine's storyline as much as I was in Nestor's, and Nestor was incredibly interesting. I absolutely loved the way anytime Nestor and Cassian had a conversation, I was in stitches. I was laughing my head off, because the two of them just went at it, and it was beautiful. Obviously Nestor is the older sister, and she never understood Feyre's actions. She never understood her father's actions and didn't respect him. And then she got thrown into this new world. She was given these incredible abilities that no one really understands, and she's cranky. And it's fantastic, because no one would be okay in that situation. Why would you be okay? Your entire world has been upended, and she seemed to be the only person who was actively rebelling against. It was a real sense of rejection, and she couldn't connect to Feyre. She couldn't connect to Elaine, but not for lack of trying. She was trying with Elaine, and she was surrounded by people that she was pretty sure she was not supposed to like. And watching her develop, the way she worked with Aberrant, the way that she developed feelings for Cassian, the way that she came into her own and she came to a place of understanding and acceptance was really lovely. When her father died at the very end, that was really heartbreaking, because she finally came to respect him and understand his motivations at the end, as he tried valiantly to be the person to help save his daughters, and brings all of these ships to their aid without being asked. He just does it. He wants to save his children, and she finally understands, and then he's taken away from her. That was just absolutely shattering. And I think it perhaps affected her more than anyone else. That sort of character development is really nice, and that's what I live for, and that's what was done so beautifully in this book. Then there's Cassian, who is delightful in his irreverence towards Nestor, and the way that he has a habit of picking on the girls, but in a way that is not meant negatively. He knows that he is surrounded by very powerful women, and that they are all capable of incredible things, and he's not threatened by them, and he's not trying to belittle them. He's trying to help them succeed. And what we find in this book is just how driven and how loyal Cassian is, because he throws himself into battle after battle after battle to protect his family. And there was a really good point, and I forgot to mention it when I was talking about Rhysand, where everyone knows that Rhysand throws himself into situations to protect his family without thinking about himself. And that really frustrates everyone else, because he had himself locked up under the mountain while they got to stay free, and that really frustrated them, because they wanted to be able to protect him, their High Lord. And he does that again and again in this book. He constantly puts himself in the firing line so that they don't have to. And Cassian's had enough of it, basically, and he turns around at one point and says, well, now it's our turn to do that for you. And he does it, and it's wonderful. And you can just see how much this group of people really love one another. And you don't get that in a lot of books. You can get a sense of character and place and people who respect one another, but these people love one another, and they would die for one another, and that's believable without being over the top in this book. My second favourite character is Aberrant, and she always has been one of my absolute favourites since she was introduced, because she's just so mysterious. This tiny little woman who is not a woman at all, who is something fierce and destructive and scary, wrapped up in this tiny little package. And while we find out who and what she is. We don't really find out who and what she is, except that she has incredible power and she is sneaky and shifty. And I have to admit, this was probably the one thing that I wasn't taken by surprise by in this book. Part of me had a feeling that she was going to use the book and the cauldron to do something that was not what Feyre expected, and she did. I'm glad that she did, because in that same way where Cassian decided that he wanted to throw himself in the firing line on behalf of Rhysand, Amren did the same thing. She knew that Feyre could handle what she needed her to do, and she did it. And she did it without thought for herself. She knew that if she was unleashed, that there was a very good chance that she would not be coming back. And she was okay with that. She'd found her acceptance. She'd found her peace with it. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful that she was back at the end. But at the same time, it wouldn't have been a bad thing had that been her swan song ending, where she goes out and she saves everyone. But maybe we'll get an Amren book. And if that's the case, I'll accept that as a perfectly fine, perfectly respectable ending. Still, I really loved the way that she worked with Nesta. I loved how cranky Amren was. That was amazing. Everyone needs a cranky character, because sometimes the cranky character just tells it like it is, and you need that in your life. Then there was Lucien, who played a big part in the first part of the book and then sort of fizzled out and disappeared. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, because I don't know, it was almost like he was being set up, with all the Fox analogies, it was almost like he was being set up to betray them at the end, and he didn't. And I don't know, that storyline felt incomplete for me. And like I said, I don't think his and Elaine's mating bond story was resolved. I'm glad that it wasn't resolved, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about them. I don't know, I don't have thoughts on that. Let me know, what are your thoughts on Elaine and Lucien? Let me know in the comments, because I don't know how I feel. It was really nice to see all of the other High Lords again, and to see how they had to negotiate to work together, and how the fact that they all have secrets, they all have bargaining points, and they all have their own histories as well that affect their decision making. And it was nice to see that in a little bit more depth outside of A Court of Thorns and Roses. So that was really cool. And it was nice to see Tarquin again, and to see how, even though he was holding a grudge, he could then go from that place of being really distrustful of characters to actually trying to puzzle out their intentions, and then finding a way to accept that because they need allies. And I thought that was really interesting. Then there's Feyre's father, and that was really sad, because he's mentioned throughout the book and they don't know where he is. He comes and he's the one who helps save them in the end, bringing the fleet. Then he dies, and then it's really sad, and I wish there'd just been a little bit more time, just a fraction more. But still, the emotional impact was there, so rip out my heart and be done with it. So those are some of my thoughts on A Court of Wings and Ruin. They're not even vaguely coherent. Let me know your thoughts and feelings about A Court of Wings and Ruin down below. I would love to hear them, and spoiler away, because I've read this book and now I can talk about spoilers. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye.